On the surface, she had a life that was almost impossibly perfect. She was a celebrated fashion designer, dressing everyone from Michelle Obama to Nicole Kidman. She was the longtime partner of a rock god, Mick Jagger, a constant, elegant presence by his side on red carpets and in the most exclusive circles of the world. She was tall, beautiful, and successful, a woman who seemed to have everything. But behind the flawless facade, a silent war was raging. A war against millions of dollars in debt, against the crushing pressure of a world that demanded perfection, and against a pride that refused to let her ask for help. This isn't just the story of a fashion designer. It's the story of what happens when the weight of a perfect image becomes too heavy to bear, and the tragic cost of keeping up appearances in a world that has no room for failure. So how does a woman at the very top of her world end up completely alone with a secret that size? Wrenscott was born Laura Bambro in 1964, and her story begins not in Paris or London, but in the small, conservative town of Roy, Utah. She was adopted by Mormon parents, Ivan and Lula Bambro, and grew up alongside two adopted siblings, Jan and Randall, in a world far removed from the one she would later inhabit. From a young age, she stood out, literally. By the time she was 12, she was already 6'3", a towering figure in a town of average heights. It was this height that first pushed her towards fashion. Unable to find clothes that fit, she learned to sew, to deconstruct and reconstruct garments, to understand the architecture of clothing from the inside out. As she would later put it herself, "I had to learn to sew when I was growing up because nothing else fitted me." It was a skill born of necessity, but it would become the foundation of her entire career. She was a girl who learned early on that if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. It was a lesson that would define her life, for better and for worse. Her escape from Utah came at 17, when she was spotted by the legendary photographer Bruce Weber during a photo shoot. He saw something in the impossibly tall girl from the small town, and on his advice, she packed her bags and moved to Paris. It was there that Laura Bambro became Wrenscott, a name that was as elegant and enigmatic as she was. She quickly found work as a model, her unique look and statuesque frame catching the eye of designers like Thierry Mugler and Chanel. She became a muse for photographers like Helmut Newton and Guy Bourdin, her legs famously featured in a Pretty Polly hosiery campaign. She was living the dream of every small-town girl, a life of glamour and excitement in the fashion capital of the world. But Loren would later admit she didn't particularly like being objectified. And that tension between the image the world wanted from her and the one she wanted to build for herself never really left her. Modeling was never the end goal. It was a stepping stone, a way to learn the industry, to understand the world she wanted to conquer. And in the early 1990s, she made her move, leaving Paris for the sun-drenched promise of California. In California, Loren transitioned from being in front of the camera to being behind it. She became a stylist, a powerful, often invisible force shaping the images of Hollywood's biggest stars. She worked with Herb Ritts, Karl Lagerfeld, and Mario Sorrenti, and styled everyone from Madonna to Julia Roberts. She designed costumes for films like Eyes Wide Shut and Ocean's 13, her keen eye for detail, and her understanding of silhouette making her a sought-after collaborator. She had a reputation for being a perfectionist, for being demanding, for knowing exactly what she wanted. It was a reputation that earned her respect, but also kept people at a distance. She was a woman in control, a woman who didn't need anyone's help. In 2001, Wrenscott met Mick Jagger. Their relationship, which would last for 13 years, catapulted her into a new stratosphere of fame. She was no longer just a successful stylist. She was the girlfriend of a rock and roll legend. It was a role that came with immense privilege, but also immense pressure. She was now a public figure, her every move scrutinized, her every outfit dissected. But behind the glamorous exterior, a quiet struggle was beginning. The world saw a power couple, a perfect match of art and rock and roll. What they didn't see was the slow, creeping anxiety that was beginning to take hold of Loren. The world of the Rolling Stones and the high society that surrounded them was a notoriously difficult one to navigate. It was a world of old money and established hierarchies, not always welcoming to outsiders. Loren, the self-made woman from Utah, was in many ways an outsider. There were whispers, rumors, the subtle but persistent question of whether she truly belonged. Jagger's own bandmates reportedly called her the band's Yoko Ono, and she was said to have been banned from joining the Stones on their final Australian tour. And yet she was a woman who had built her own career, her own name. She said it plainly, "I'm a fashion designer. I don't want to be defined as someone's girlfriend." It was a paradox that would come to define her life, because in 2006, she took the final step, launching her own fashion label. It was the culmination of everything she had learned, from sewing her own clothes in Utah to styling A-listers in Hollywood. Her collections were characterized by sumptuous femininity combined with unconventional touches, aimed at establishing a well-defined silhouette. The label was built upon a philosophy of timeless style, rejecting trends in favor of versatile, classic pieces famed for their sexy silhouettes and intricate construction. She even coined a set of style principles she called Lorenisms, practical, opinionated advice like wearing a nude shoe to elongate the leg, or that a well-designed garment should do all the work so a woman never needs shapewear underneath. Her first collection was entirely black dresses, including the now iconic headmistress dress, worn by Madonna, Sarah Jessica Parker, Angelina Jolie, and Carla Bruni. She had built her own empire on her own terms. But the higher she climbed, the more she had to lose, and the more she had to hide. This pressure was compounded by the financial realities of her business. Running a high-end fashion label is an incredibly expensive endeavor. The costs of production, of shows, of marketing are astronomical. And while Loren's designs were critically acclaimed and worn by the most famous women in the world, her company was struggling. Court filings from her company, LS Fashion Limited, revealed liabilities exceeding assets by nearly $6 million as of December 2012. It was a secret she kept hidden, a private shame she couldn't bear to reveal. To the world, she was the successful designer, the partner of a man worth an estimated $500 million. But in reality, she was a woman watching her dream crumble, living a double life of red carpets and private jets on one side and frantic phone calls to creditors and sleepless nights staring at spreadsheets on the other. The more successful she appeared, the more isolated she became. While her business was drowning in debt, she continued to work, to create, to show up, appearing on red carpets, giving interviews, planning future collections, all while carrying the secret of her financial ruin. To be in a relationship with a man who could have solved her problems with a single phone call, and yet to be unable to ask for help, is a uniquely modern form of torture. It speaks to a deep-seated fear of being seen as weak, of being seen as a failure, of being seen as anything less than the self-sufficient woman she had worked so hard to become. Her pride, the very thing that had driven her to succeed, had become her prison. She was terrified of being labeled a gold digger who had used her famous partner to fund a failing business. In the world she inhabited, status was everything, and the admission of financial trouble was a social death sentence. So she kept up the pretense, smiling for the cameras while the walls closed in around her. Her friends would later say they had no idea of the extent of her troubles. She was a master of compartmentalization, a woman who was used to being in control, and was losing it in the most public and private of ways. What made it even lonelier was the distance that had grown between her and the family she had left behind in Utah. Her sister Jan had stayed in Roy, married, and raised 8 children, the quiet, rooted life that Loren had fled at 18. The two had drifted apart over the years, and by the time their mother died in 2008, they had barely spoken. At their father's funeral, years earlier, the two sisters had stepped outside together, and Loren had looked at Jan and said simply, "I envy you. You have a family. It was a window into the private grief of a woman who appeared to have everything. She had confided to close friends that she desperately wanted children, but with Jagger, who already had 7 children and several grandchildren, she never pushed the issue. The woman the world saw as the ultimate success story was, in her most private moments, longing for something entirely ordinary. In February 2014, she canceled her London Fashion Week show. The official explanation was production delays, but the reality was far darker. According to former New York Times fashion writer Kathy Horan, Scott had in fact been planning to announce she was closing her business entirely, and yet, just months earlier, she had given an interview in which she said, "I don't really measure success by anything other than if I am happy. Am I happy waking up every morning? And despite the challenges of running my own business, do I look forward to going to work?" The gap between those words and the reality she was living is almost unbearable to read now. No one knew that the company was on the verge of total collapse, that the debts were insurmountable, that the woman who seemed to have everything was, in fact, losing it all. The scale of what she was hiding was staggering, and yet, to anyone who saw her that winter, there was nothing to suggest the end was near. She was still designing, still appearing, still performing the role of wrenscott with total conviction. She texted her assistant just 90 minutes before she was found, asking her to come to the apartment, but not saying why. It was the last communication she ever sent. On the morning of March 17th, 2014, wrenscott was found dead in her New York City apartment. She had taken her own life. There was no note, no explanation, just a final, desperate act of a woman who could no longer bear the weight of her own secrets. She was only 49 years old. The news was met with stunned disbelief. How could this be? How could a woman who was so strong, so talented, so relentlessly driven be gone? On the other side of the world, Mick Jagger was on tour in Australia when the news reached him. The Rolling Stones canceled their entire 7-date Australian and New Zealand tour immediately. In a statement, Jagger said he was still struggling to understand how his lover and best friend could end her life in this tragic way. Keith Richards said no one saw it coming. Meanwhile, back in Utah, Jan Shane learned of her sister's death through Google after a friend texted her with the news. The two women had not spoken in years. Jan would later be excluded from the funeral entirely, barred from saying goodbye to the little sister she had grown up with in Roy. The gulf between Loren's two worlds, the one she was born into and the one she had built, had never been wider or more painful than in those final days. The story of wrenscott is a tragic reminder that success is not always what it seems, that the pressure to maintain a perfect image can be a deadly one, and that even in a world of immense wealth and privilege, a person can be utterly, desperately alone. It's a story about the corrosive power of secrets and the quiet desperation that can hide behind the most beautiful of smiles. It's a story that asks us to look beyond the surface, to question the narratives we are fed, and to remember that behind every perfect image, there is a human being with all their flaws, their fears, and their vulnerabilities. What do you think is the most tragic part of wrenscott's story? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.